I ask that you keep your microphones muted. You can also enable a transcript using the options at the bottom of your screen. My name is James Dixon Goff, and I will be chairing this session. We're very happy that you can join us today. I think it's going to be a great session. We've got some really brilliant speakers today. We encourage your comments and questions throughout the session. So if you do think of a question or would like to make a comment at any point, just type it in the chat box and we'll address it during the question and answer session. The session is being recorded and links will be updated on our website and YouTube channel afterwards. Okay, so Suella, are we all right to start the recording?
Yeah, all good to go.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, so on today's panel we have two amazing presenters, Thelma Nwanje and Amelia Rose. Thelma is a PhD student studying economics. Her research focuses on agricultural technology adoption amongst women farmers in developing countries, using Zambia as a case study. Amelia is studying it for a BSc in Sustainability and Environmental Management. Her research explores #online environmentalism, a characterization of the intersectional environmental justice discourse as seen on Instagram. Amelia's research explores and characterizes a new generation of environmental justice discourse and its convergence with intersectionality, an analytical framework which seeks to highlight how the overlap of an individual's socio-political identities influences experience of privilege and oppression. Okay, so yeah, welcome again, everyone. And without further ado, I'd like to hand over to our first speaker, Thelma.
Good afternoon, everyone. Are you able to hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you fine. Have you got the slides up, Thelma?
Yes. Are you able to see it now?
Not yet, no.
Let me try again. Can you see it now?
No, it's not come up yet. Okay, yeah, that's it. That's it. Okay. Perfect.
Okay. I'll be presenting on the agriculture technology adoption using Zambia as a case study. The presentation is as follows. I'll give an introduction, my research questions, the data that I used, the estimation strategy, the results, and conclusions. The background for my research is so literature on agriculture productivity attributes low yields that farmers experience to low and non-adoption of improved technologies. The low adoption of improved technologies tend to be so widespread among smallholder farmers. However, it tends to be severe on plots of fields that are being controlled by women farmers. Agriculture production, especially in the rural areas, is often undermined by gender-related constraints and unequal access to productive resources. Women agriculture productivity is highly dependent on having access to productive resources such as land, such as credit, extension services, and other technologies. This is based on the study that was done by Ragasa in Ethiopia and others. So modeling farm household behavior is key in understanding the technology patterns of smallholder farmers in Zambia. Economic theory assumes that households choose the best collection of commodities, in this case practices, consistent with the limited resources available to them. When a decision maker is faced with multiple technical options, such as agricultural practices, observed outcomes can be modeled within the framework of discrete choice analysis. The decision maker can be presented with several alternative choice from where to make the decision from. The attractiveness of each alternative within the choice set often depends on the number of constraints that a farmer or a decision maker is faced with. The choice of inputs to use and in whatever quantity will depend on the objective function of an individual farmer. For example, if the farmer wants to maximize profit or they want to maximize household food security. If the purpose of growing a particular crop is for sale, then the primary focus for that individual farmer will be profitability. If it's for home consumption, the farmer is more concerned about how to store the product, how to process it, and how it tests. For this study, technology adoption by women and men smallholder farmers is viewed from the collective models of cooperative bargain models of households. It is assumed individuals have different preferences, but resources within a household are put together. The model suggests that the effect of individual utility or well-being outside the household will affect his or her bargaining power within the household. Factors like individuals' income, access to land, other resources, the education level, this tends to affect their bargaining power within the household. Studies have shown that women's access to land, credit, and other resources outside the household affects their access to resources within the household as well as their decision-making power. With technology adoption, the household model suggests that if men and women have different preferences regarding agricultural production or consumption, the bargaining power of individuals will affect their outcomes of the decision. So this is a graph of maize fields, that is on males and female managed fields. So I use the gender of the field decision maker as opposed to the gender of the household head to address the gender gap in fields as well as technology adoption. So the one in red is showing the fields on plots that are managed by women, and the one in dark blue is showing the fields on plots that are managed by men. So the question is, why is there a gender gap in adoption of improved technologies and crop yields? What are some of the factors that contribute to gender differences in technology adoption? Does the presence of a male head of a household affect the adoption behavior of women farmers? Does the gender matter in maize production efficiency? So these are some of the research questions that my study tried to address. So in terms of the data, this study uses around 2 waves of rural household survey data that was collected in Zambia. That is, the first wave covers 2010-2011 agriculture season, and it covered about 8,839 small household farmers. The second wave was collected in 2013-2014 agriculture season, and 7,254 households were re-interviewed. So for this study, I used a balanced panel of 4,161 households that grew maize in both 2010-2011 and 2013-2014 farming season. In addition to the survey data that was collected, I also supplement the study with focus group discussions, which were done in 3 provinces, covering 2 districts in each province. So all this was collected to supplement the study that was conducted. In terms of the estimation strategy, the decision to adopt a given technology was analyzed using a panel binary model. That is, I used a correlated random approach method to estimate the factors that contribute to adoption behavior. Then the second estimation strategy to examine the factors associated with productivity differences by gender, that is male versus female on female plots. I used a stochastic frontier approach to estimate the efficiency as well as determine the differences in productivity. So I will not go much into the formulas that I have displayed, but if you are interested, you can let me know. So in terms of the results, I'll start with the descriptive results. This table shows the differences in access to agricultural services and resources. So the first column, it shows the average farmer. This is showing the number of fields, basically looking at the maize field. So I'm focusing only on one crop, that's the maize field. So the average farmer, column D shows the male farmers, column C, that's the female farmers, and column D and E split now column C into separate groups, that is females who are in male-headed households and females who are in female-headed households. In terms of the differences in agriculture, resources, and services, we can start looking at the size of land that these people have access to. On average, a male farmer has more access to land compared to a female farmer. Similarly, when you look at the females in the male-headed households, they tend to have more access to land compared to the females in the female-headed households. But when we look at the hectares cultivated, we find that females in female-headed households cultivated more land compared to the females in the male-headed households. Further, we look at farmer organization, the third variable. So here is membership to an agriculture organization. So farmers in developing countries like Zambia, they tend to belong to farmer organizations. You see that a high percentage of women in the male-headed households have are members to farmer organization compared to females in female-headed households. But when you look at males and females separately, regardless of who the head of the household is, more males tend to belong to this organization compared to the female counterparts. It also follows in terms of the value of assets that they have. Male farmers tend to have a high value of assets compared to their female counterparts. And also credit, access to credit and extension services tends to be higher among males compared to their female counterparts. So we see even in the male-headed households, females tend to have more access compared to the females that are in the female-headed households. So there is a significant difference between male and female farmers regarding their access to agriculture extension, credit, and land. Men are more likely to access these services and resources compared to their female counterparts. When we compare to the females in male and female-headed households, women in male-headed households are more likely to have access to agriculture services and resources compared to women in female-headed households. Land cultivated by women in female-headed households, however, was more compared to those in the male-headed households. Now we look at the factors that are affecting technology adoption. So in terms of technology adoption, I looked at four important technologies that are available to the farmers. There are quite a number, but for this study, I only focused on the use of improved seed, the use of fertilizer, the use of herbicides, and animal traction on their farms. The first result talks about the females that are in the male-headed households. So for this variable, women who are in the male-headed household are less likely to adopt any of these technologies, and it tends to be to a significantly it shows a significant effect, especially on herbicides. They were less likely to adopt herbicides, the use of herbicides. Even females in female-headed households were less likely to adopt improved seed and they show no significant adoption of fertilizer and herbicide except for animal traction. So education, the level of education of a farmer shows a significant effect on adopting herbicides, the use of herbicides on their farms. Household size also has an influence on whether the household is going to, on that particular farmer is going to adopt a particular technology or not. The variable HCI, this is Household Commercialization Index. So it measures how much a household is selling from what they are producing. So for households that are that have a high commercialization index, they tend to adopt improved seed, they tend to adopt the use of herbicides, and also they tend to use animal traction. You can see also this variable is positive on fertilizer adoption. So in terms of their rate of adoption, for households that are focusing more on selling their products, they are more likely to adopt these improved technologies compared to their counterparts who are not selling the crop. In terms of farmer organization, being a member of a farmer organization. So in Zambia, for instance, we have a subsidy program. So farmers who belong to this farmer organization tend to have access to a subsidy program where they get improved seed and fertilizer at a subsidized price. So farmers in this who are members of this farmer organization are more likely to adopt these technologies compared to those farmers that are not members. And as I showed earlier, we saw that most farmers who are members of farmer organization are men compared to their female counterparts. Access to extension services. So extension services is where farmers tend to get advised by experts in the agriculture sector how to use inputs, how to use particular technologies. So it's more like an informal learning for the farmers. So those that are having access to extension services, they tend to adopt these improved technologies compared to those that are not having extension services. On the other hand, access to credit, unfortunately, doesn't show any significant effect on farmers adopting these technologies. It actually shows a negative effect on adoption of improved seed as well as improved use of fertilizer. So further, I interact the variables for access to credit and being in a male-headed household. So for females who are in male-headed households and they had access to credit, they are more likely to have to adopt the use of improved seed. Now, other than that, they were not able to adopt any of those things. Then females, again, who had access to extension service, they were more likely to adopt the use of improved seed as well as fertilizer. Then for females who had access to credit, it shows they were not likely to adopt any of these improved technologies, except for those who had access to extension. They were more likely to adopt the use of herbicides, and those who are members of farmer organizations were more likely to adopt the use of fertilizer. So these are some of the differences that the factors that are affecting the rate of adoption among the different farmers in Zambia. So in summary is that regardless of the gender of the household head, females were less likely to adopt the improved technologies. Female farmers, so these results are a summary of the quantitative analysis as well as the focus group discussions. So based on what we found from the quantitative analysis, we did a focus group discussions with the farmers to ask why the rate of adoption was so low. So female farmers preferred local varieties, particularly for home consumption. So according to their belief, it is believed that local varieties tend to test better and they store better than improved varieties. Local varieties were also much cheaper to produce as the the seed is cheaper, and fertilizer is also not required when you are using a local variety. They also emphasize to say that hybrid varieties were mostly used for commercial purposes. If they are going to sell their crop, then they tend to use hybrid seed because the yield is high and their focus is mainly they want to get profit out of it. But if the focus is mainly for home consumption, then they prefer the local varieties. Membership to farmer organization has a positive effect on the adoption of improved seed, fertilizer, and animal attraction. Farmers that had access to extension services were more likely to adopt improved seed as well as herbicides. Females in male-headed households who received credit were more likely to use improved seed compared to those in the female-headed households. So in both cases, these females, they had access to credit, but for the females in male-headed households, they were more likely to use improved seed compared to the females in female-headed households. Further, now we look at the technical efficiency on depending on who the field owner is. So in a number of studies, they tend to say females are less efficient in their production. But our study, we want to find out, are females really inefficient? What are the things that are really causing them to be inefficient? So on this graph, the estimated technical efficiency on male controlled plots was 55% compared to 44% on the female controlled plots. Yes, based on what we have, we found the technical efficiency of production among female farmers was low. But what are some of the factors that are contributing to their low efficiency in production? Does gender matter in their productivity? So in terms of the factors that are contributing to production efficiency, so we'll look at things like the use of hybrid seeds, there's education level. Although it's not statistically significant when we use a translog, it's only significant in the Cope-Douglas model. So hybrid seed, the use of fertilizer, and commercialization, this tends to affect the level of efficiency in production. Then we look at the gender of the field owner. So this is where, given one, it's where a female is the owner of the field, and otherwise it's a male who's controlling the field. And we see that it's not statistically significant in affecting the production efficiency. We look at access to credit, it does have an effect, access to extension service and farmer organization. So then the negative sign shows it reduces the efficiency, and the positive sign shows it, the negative sign, it shows it reduces the inefficiency, and the positive sign shows it increases the inefficiency. So from this, this table, it shows the gender of a farmer, of a field owner, doesn't really have an effect on the production efficiency, but other factors like what inputs they are using, what kind of methods are they using, and are they having access to extension services, are they members of farmer organization, this tends to affect their efficiency level in the production processes. As access to extension services, that's where they get information on how to produce certain crops and how to manage their farms. And use of hybrid seeds tend to increase their yields as well. Fertilizers tend to enhance their yields as well. So these factors tend to affect their production efficiency compared to them being either male or female. The closing remarks are low yields on female-headed plots are due to limited use of improved seed and fertilizer, limited access to productive resources, and their preferences for local varieties. So with local varieties, the yield that is expected when they plant is very low compared to when they use improved varieties. How do you close the resource gap? Increase access to productive resources such as land. So in countries like Zambia and other developing countries, women are less likely to have access to land on their own. If a woman is married, they tend to have access to land through their husband, that is when they are married, their access to land is from their husband. So a woman, it's considered a taboo for a woman to go to a chief or a local in a village to go and request for a land of her own when she's married, because she's expected to own land through the husband. So their limited access to land also affects how much they are going to use, because their use of land is dependent on how much their husband is going to say, you are going to grow your crops on this particular land. So if they do not have so much bargaining power in that household, they may not actually grow crops that they are managing themselves, but whatever they grow is in line with what their husband wants. And in terms of the adoption rate, again, it will be in line with what the owner of the land prefers. So microfinance.
Sorry, Sam, I was going to say we'll need to wrap up sort of fairly soon, so kind of allow Amelia to do hers. So probably just like another minute, if that's okay.
Yes.
Okay,
microfinance institutions provide small credit packages, increase financing to extension services from government, and market participation. Households that are more commercialized adopt improved technologies. Promote women participation in maize marketing can help increase the adoption rate and encourage women to look at farming as a business beyond home consumption. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Thelma. That was really interesting. And Amelia, if you're ready, I'd like to hand it over to you.
Yeah, that's fine. I'll just upload my PowerPoint.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, can everyone see it?
Yeah, that looks good. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So hi everyone, my name's Millie, and today I'll be presenting my undergraduate dissertation entitled #Online Environmentalism, a characterization of the intersectional environmental justice discourse as seen on Instagram. So before getting into the details of my research, I think it's important to give you all a little bit of context. So my inspiration for this dissertation arose from two very big components of my life. First of all, like many people my age, use of social media is embedded within my daily routine and has ultimately become second nature. And for me, Instagram in particular plays an integral role in my life and shapes the way in which I learn about the world around me and how I perceive certain problems. My enthusiasm for my degrees also influenced this particular area of research. I'm currently in my final year studying sustainability and environmental management, and my love for the topic has encouraged me to explore issues of sustainability and the environment outside of the lecture theatre, and led me to engage with a lot of environmentalist content on Instagram. And through my own experiences of Instagram, I recognise that a lot of environmental issues were discussed parallel to issues of social justice, whereas elsewhere in the public domain, I found that environmental problems are often discussed one-dimensionally. And with the help of my supervisor, I set out to explore Instagram's environmental justice discourse and framed my research using the concept of intersectionality, an analytical framework coined by Kimberly Crenshaw and seeks to illuminate how different socio-political identities overlap and mutually reinforce to shape unique experiences of privilege and oppression. So my overarching aim for this research was to explore this current iteration of the environmental justice movement, how it manifests on Instagram, and in particular, how it converges with ideas of intersectionality. To do this, I set objectives to find out what types of ideas and issues are foregrounded in the discourse and what type of activism is promoted. To analyse the discourse, I collected 74 different social and environmental justice related Instagram posts from 18 environmental activist profiles. I analysed the content using thematic analysis and this was to help me categorise the different ideas and issues foregrounded within the discourse. And to support my analysis, I applied, where relevant, an analytical framework devised by Carol Bakke to facilitate a multi-layered exploration into the assumptions underpinning the issues within the discourse and how they may have come about. And on the right-hand side is a mobile screenshot of one of the profiles I used for analysis. So after analysing the Instagram content, the following patterns emerged and included 4 problem themes relating to issues of intersectionality, racism, climate change, and intersectional feminism. And finally, 1 activist practices and principles theme, wherein Instagram content advocated for 3 key things, including the acknowledgement of key BIPOC figures within the environmental movement, inclusive activism, and amplification of marginalised voices. So in light of my findings, I claimed that all of the themes revolved around the concept of intersectionality. This was particularly the case with the problem themes, as they were all discussed either explicitly or implicitly through an intersectional lens. The discourse's recommendations for activism were also underpinned by intersectional principles. I also briefly conducted a critical analysis of any absences within the discourse, and it came to my attention that intersections of disability or LGBTQI+, were largely downplayed or absent from Instagram's content. However, this could be down to the fact that my sample was relatively small and couldn't capture all of these issues currently discussed on Instagram. And with regards to moving forward with an intersectional environmental justice discourse, I included that its integration into scholarly arenas can facilitate a more holistic and inclusive understanding of environmental justice issues. In addition, integrating this discourse into political spheres can alter how environmental problems are defined and can potentially transform the lives of marginalised communities, especially if they are involved in the policy-making processes. So my research into intersectional environmental justice deeply resonates with this year's theme of leaving no one behind and holds great significance with regards to a number of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Goals 10 and 16 in particular, which advocate for reduced inequalities and peace, justice, and strong institutions, reflect the true essence of this project, encapsulating a vision whereby every member of society is considered and included and protected from any form of social and environmental harm. The results of this research also encompass many other interconnected goals, including numbers 3, 5, 11, 13, and 15, which respectively promote health and well-being for everyone, gender equality and female empowerment, sustainable communities, climate action, and life on land. The intersectional framework which underpins this research is essential for understanding the matrices of domination which perpetuate social and environmental oppression and fundamentally hinder any progress towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. Thank you for listening to the presentation, and I'm sure we'll answer any questions that you have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Amelia. That was really interesting. So yeah, thanks for both those presentations. I really enjoyed them. So now is a chance for people in the audience to ask any questions. So if anybody does have any questions, just pop them into the chat. And we can make sure that Thelma or Amelia have a chance to respond. I can see that Jen is typing one at the moment, so you can just wait for that. In the meantime, Thelma, I've got quite a lot of questions actually relating to your research, because I thought it was really interesting. But one of the things that you pointed out for the reasons that women farmers prefer to farm kind of, I'm trying to think of the right word, for kind of the sort of local, I guess the local kind of seeds varieties, was the fact that they were kind of durable and they tasted better. So did you see when you were going through kind of focus groups and chatting to them, there was any kind of resistance around moving away from that? Because obviously there's a commercial reason to move away from those types. But But is there a possibility to maybe blend those with the kind of the commercial aspects, or is there no market for them?
So currently, at the moment, what the farmers do, they tend to mix the seed when they do not have enough money to buy the hybrid seed, the improved varieties. They tend to mix the local variety and the improved variety and plant them in the same field. So to minimize the cost, they'll try and use both seeds in a particular field. So for them, it's more on what the objective is for growing that particular crop. And most women farmers, they are not growing this particular crop for commercial use. Maize is a staple crop in Zambia. So in most parts of the country, we consume maize. So in terms of consumption, if the woman is more focused on what the household is going to consume. So the focus, their main focus is first household food security before they can think of the market.
Yeah.
And looking at the resource constraints, they tend to use more of the local seeds. But when they want to have more yields, they have to use the hybrid seeds. And with limited resources, they tend to combine the two varieties in one field.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, Jen's just written a question, so I'm just gonna read that out. So Jen has asked, yes, it's a question for Thelma again, just wondering who your research is most relevant to and who needs to take action on this, on the findings.
So this research is more relevant to research institutions that are focused on breeding, plant breeders, and also on the government as well. Government in terms of their resource allocations to these farmers. So we are focusing on the researchers who are the plant breeders. How can they come up with varieties that are more compatible, that have such qualities like the local varieties at a minimal cost? And also the government, how do they come in terms of credit access for these farmers? Right now, a farmer cannot just walk in a commercial bank to access credit because the asset base is very low. They need collateral and they do not have that. So how can they build credit facilities for smallholder farmers in the rural areas? How do they access that for them to access inputs and adopt certain technologies?
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Amelia, just a question for you while I'm waiting for some to kind of come up. So in your research, how do you think when you're kind of using your social media to kind of analyse kind of discussions around sustainability that you ensure or make sure that you're accounting for the marginalised voices that will be impacted by things such as climate change or other sustainability issues? Because you kind of said actually, for example, LGBT groups seem to be missing from some of that discourse.
Yeah. So I think some of my conclusions might have been like a little bit unfair, I suppose, because, you know, like I said, I only analysed 74 posts, which in the grand scheme of things, like that isn't a lot at all. And I think I found that, you know, since being on Instagram, I may have seen like relevant posts to those particular intersections, especially disability. But I think when I was researching it, because I wanted to get like a representative kind of, you know, a good representation of this discourse, I was very conscious that I wanted to source content from a lot of diverse environmentalist profiles. So I didn't want to just, you know, kind of use profiles where it was either kind of like white people or, you know, I think there was so many different diverse like accounts that I sourced from, and I think that was like my main kind of focus, that I wanted to get a representative kind of sample really. But I think it's just difficult to kind of get you know, get either a valid or kind of a fair representation when you're collecting such a small sample of data, because, you know, there's hundreds of thousands of posts out there. It just happened to be that I had to kind of narrow down like my criteria, because, I'm only an undergrad. I can't analyze everything, so I had to be quite specific with the posts that I was analyzing. But I was very conscious to make sure that either the accounts that I was sourcing from were very different to each other, and also each post kind of covered like a very different issue. Just because there's so many different things going on in the world, I kind of wanted to get quite a nice snapshot of all of that.
Yeah, it's really challenging, isn't it? There is so much data out there, and there's also the kind of accusations that kind of social media becomes a bit of a bubble, isn't it? So it's making sure you try and step out of that. Another question has popped up. Again, kind of comment saying kind of really interesting and timely research. And the question is, can you tell us a bit more about how you analyze Instagram posts, and how do you identify environmental justice issues?
Yeah, so this one was quite difficult actually, because again, it was very much down to my own judgment and what I chose to include in my research. I suppose it's quite biased in the way that I had these kind of ideas that I wanted to kind of include, and sometimes it means that you're going out looking for these certain things. But in terms of actually analysing them, I think I was very conscious that I wanted to get a range of social and environmental justice issues as well. Like, I didn't want to just focus on purely environmental things, because environmental justice does, it's inextricably linked to social justice as well. So there were some things on there that didn't explicitly relate to climate change or any environmental issues like that, but I think with the themes, especially with intersectionality, everything does overlap and it does kind of link with each other. So I think environmental justice, it was difficult. I think some posts were probably more obvious than others, but I think it was basically just using my own judgment. And I think some things, were a lot more difficult to kind of categorize into a particular theme, but I think others were a lot more obvious, and those were the ones that ended up being in my data set. But I suppose, if I had more time, like in the future, if I wanted to kind of, broaden this avenue a little bit, then I think, including more data would definitely be, beneficial.
Okay, interesting. Thelma, I've not noticed any other questions come up, so I'm going to kind of ask you a few more questions of stuff that kind of cropped up. So you chose a very specific field of criteria to assess kind of yield, etc. In your study. Is that using a standard methodology, or is that something you came up with yourself?
Sorry, the question again?
So when you were assessing things such as kind of yield, kind of land owned, all that kind of stuff, you used a very specific set of criteria. So I'm trying to think of an example of it. In fact, I'll go back to your presentation and just find out. It's probably the best way of doing it. So kind of female in a male headed household, female in a female headed household, kind of education, household size, landholding size, HCI, all those types of things. Were those coming from another piece of research, or those kind of categories that you came up with by yourself?
Okay, so when we are looking at productivity and adoption behavior, so we look at factors that are contributing to, say, productivity. So besides what the farmer is using, we are going to include variables like household variables. So in terms of household variables, we look at the land size, the area cultivated, and in terms of individual characteristics, we'll look at the age, the education. So this is kind of like a standard in terms of measuring productivity. So we look at the factors that are affecting the biological side, and also the ability of a farmer to manage their farms. And in terms of ability, we'll look at the age of that particular farmer, and also the education level. How are they able to assimilate information if they are given information through an extension service? So it's kind of standard, but for the male and female headed households, what is normally used, we'll just use for the farms where you just use one variable which distinguish two groups, that's male or female-headed household. But for this study, we went further to say we want to look at plot level, that is at a farmer level, who is managing this particular field. Is it a male or is it a female? Besides going, is it in a male-headed household or is it in a female-headed household? We want to look at the gender of the person managing a particular plot. So that was the additional thing that we included in our analysis, as opposed to the traditional way of using just male-headed household and female-headed household.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. And kind of noticed, I think it was joining I can't remember the right terminology, but joining like a farming organisation was shown to have benefits for both kind of gendered households. But are there any kind of other kind of underlying kind of societal structural issues that could be addressed or worked on? Because I think you kind of referenced that there were kind of challenges with kind of female kind of farmers just from a kind of cultural perspective. Is there any kind of scope for kind of challenging some of that, or is that just too tricky to do?
So things like challenging the access to, let's say, access to land is the example I gave, especially for women that are married and in a rural setup. Access to land is kind of challenging for them to own land on their own as a married person. But at the moment, things are changing and government is allowing more females now to own land. So there is that improvement in how the allocation of land is being done. But this is mostly being done in the urban areas, not yet in the rural areas. So we are still trying to move forward on how we bridge the gap in terms of access to resources such as land. Because there is abundance of land, but in terms of who's accessing more land, it's more males compared to their female counterparts.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough. And what is land availability like? Is it?
Sorry?
What is land availability like? Is it?
In terms of how available is land?
Yeah.
It is quite available in some parts of Zambia. It is most of the land is still, we have still a bush, and in most parts of the rural Zambia, it's quite vast, and there is need for more development in such parts of the of Zambia. So if people have more access to it, as being opposed to not having access, that can help. So much of the land, we have state land and we have also traditional land. So state land is the one which is being controlled by the government. Then the traditional land is controlled by people like the chiefs, the headmen in a particular area. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. Amelia, just kind of one more question for you, and can I encourage everybody attending to kind of post other questions up in the meeting chats? That would be really helpful. Amelia, so can you think of instances where the kind of analytical framework that you've developed could be used by organisations to improve I don't know, like understanding of their stakeholders or for other reasons? So where could this kind of research technique be used?
So is this the intersectional framework?
The intersectional kind of combined with the analysis of kind of social media.
Yeah. So I think intersectionality is obviously it's a broad kind of concept anyway. I mean, it was initially kind of developed, and it was Black feminist scholarship, and was kind of wanting to identify how Black women in particular faced kind of experiences of marginalization which didn't align with either Black men or white women. So it's kind of illustrating how oppression isn't kind of additive, it's I can't say the word. It's kind of mutually reinforcing anyway. So I think with regards to kind of multiple different stakeholders and everything, I think the main thing is including intersectionality and intersectional kind of approaches to environmental problem solving, or it doesn't have to be just environmental, it could be, you know, anything, because I think, you know, kind of uplifting the marginalized voices and kind of amplifying those experiences are the most important thing, because you can't really solve a problem if you're only looking at things from one point of view. So I think, yeah, in particular, definitely environmental policy making, because up until now, you know, things have just kind of, they've just kind of been considered from, you know, quite a narrow perspective, when in reality, you know, all these kind of different marginalized kind of political identities have, you know, they've been experiencing the worst of it. And I think, especially, you know, with climate change kind of, which is imminent anyway, but, you know, kind of action needs to be taken right now. And I think if people are left out of the conversation, then I don't understand how equitable and, you know, just solutions can be achieved for that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So it's not just, obviously you've used that perspective to, you know, analyze Instagram, but it should be a kind of a perspective taken on wholeheartedly. Yeah.
On Instagram, so it was quite useful to use intersectionality to frame the research, just because a lot of the posts, you know, they did kind of acknowledge intersectionality, and it differs from, you know, the more like traditional offline environmental justice movement, which just kind of focused on race in particular, because that's why the environmental justice movement formed, because it was about marginalized racial categories and also, you know, economic minorities as well. So I think kind of broadening that conversation to other identities is really important, and social media just highlights that, I think.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much, both. Just one final shout out, just to see if there's any last questions. And if not, we'll wrap up the session. Seeing if anything's popping up. No, okay, right, okay. Well, thank you everybody for joining us for today's session, and thank you so much, Thelma and Amelia. They were both really interesting presentations. So you can visit our website at sustainability.leeds.ac.uk for more information on the sessions today, and for other conference related content. Okay, thank you very much, and see you later.